Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, hot off the presses. This is breaking news live. We're not going to waste too much of the time because there's too much to get into. All right, literally, I don't know, Will. Would you say like our nation is at stake here? Right? Would you say that?
No, but yeah.
I mean, there's something big going on right now, right? That we're about to tune in live to and react to, right?
Yeah, man. We are live.
The Sesame Street season 21 finale. Oh, is that not what? Oh, never mind. It's the vice presidential debate, right?
Yeah, man.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you think we should tune in and we can pause
Jamie.
it as we push through this thing and
let's do it.
We're
not going to waste your team time.
Bring it up.
Chat box will be open. This is new to us, team. We're trying something new. Let's engage this together.
Here we go.
What's up? Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe.
Who hope to become vice president of the United States. Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take.
I don't know if you've seen, man, but they're already like kind of prepping that Vance is going to wipe the floor with him.
I hate when they do that.
Yeah, they're trying to sell like JD Vance as like this Harvard elite.
This
because the dude,
CBS
went to
News special live from
went to this
CBS
great school or whatever, but they kind of skipped the part that he was a super poor kid and like literally living the American dream and what they say they want to have happen.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance tonight meeting for the first time.
Oh, that was awkward.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate.
Well, they already know the handshake was kind of an emphasis on the last
other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for
Nobody
rebuttal.
could fuck that up.
Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute
too,
each
their
at the
mics
discretion
are
of the
not
moderator.
muted.
The primary role of the
but the ability to
is
mute the mics is still there, right?
Between the candidates,
like they can
enforce
still,
the rules,
they still have the power
and
to do
provide the candidates with the opportunity to
kill
fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set.
CBS
Governor, Senator,
randomly mute their mics if they start getting out of line.
Let's get started.
Let's count how many
Tonight,
times
our
this shit
country
happened.
is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene, and now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East.
That's something everybody should be talking about.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack
we're in a new ground war.
That attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war.
I actually had this conversation today at work.
But the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas
answer the question. I hate when they do that.
Massacred over 1,400
Put the
Israelis
question on the bottom.
Prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental.
Shaky.
Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But The expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met.
He's going to try the same technique.
Secretaries of Defense and
that
his national
Kamala
security
did,
advisors
and Pope
said he should be nowhere near the White House.
This is going to be
now,
interesting
the person
to see how
closest to them,
JD responds to this.
To Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the
he's not
office.
answering.
That was
He's
Senator
just
Vance.
going to try and
What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together,
I don't have enough Buffalo Trace for this, Will. We already
Vice President said today is we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose
if he just looks in and goes,
yes, by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams.
Do you think that if they answer the question,
I know that a lot of you are worried
it's like,
about the chaos in the world and the
time
feeling that the American dream is unattainable.
Is that how it is?
I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump.
They talk so much. Did he answer the question?
A coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is your running mate, not mine.
There it is.
Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events
Debatable,
that led us to where we are right now. And you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today, actually, a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people.
He's trying to act vested.
Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy. With this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together.
He's forgetting like where he's at.
Governors know no partisanship. They work together to all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end.
Like you can
the
tell,
federal
like
government comes in, make sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax. and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because
this is where it goes
we
back
talk
to
about
policy,
clean energy. I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership.
Right?
And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no
we got
moratorium
a
on
chat.
that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know. And
you can see that?
Like I said again, these are
good.
not liberal folks. These are not
Honestly,
folks that are
haven't
Green
seen
New Deal
anything
folks. These are
positive in this
farmers
administration
that have been
that would
drought
make me
one year,
confident
massive flooding
about
the
4
next
more
year.
years.
They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be
I agree with
topsoil
you.
from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And
Thank you
thinking
for
about
that.
how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration.
Oh,
the
this will be
crisis
good.
at the U.S.-Mexico border
this.
consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you asked about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost.
It wouldn't be instant.
He's talking about the kids. He's talking about the kids that they've lost.
Hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor,
ownership.
Do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis. This is the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually?
So I don't get how could they keep blaming Trump
by the legislature?
Maybe you can help me out.
No, he's right. He's right. He is right.
So look,
so
we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years.
I can pause this if we want to talk
to do this. And
yeah, if you want,
you America, how easy.
Just kind of explain and elaborate on that because I don't understand how that. What are they talking about?
So there was a bill. It was probably about 6 months ago. My timeline might be a little off, but there was a bipartisan bill proposed to tackle the immigration problem and do a lot of what he's saying. There's some spin on it, obviously, like, yeah, we want 1,500 more border agents, but the counter argument was, yeah, you want them to continue to process migrants, not catch them and get them the hell out of here. Which is what's happening now, right? Like, you want to plus all this stuff up. And a lot of it was the executive orders that Trump put in place, right?
Yeah.
It was a slightly watered down version of the stuff that was working at the border and that Biden has since reverted to tackle the border issue, right? So they were doing that through executive order, not legislative lawmaking, right? And so he is correct in that Trump came over the top and told all the Republicans to vote against it. Now, the Republican argument to that, and we'll see what happens when we hit play again and Vance comes back up to bat. But the Republican argument to that was, hey, like, yes, this does a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't go far enough. Like it's not really tackling the issues. And then the things that you're putting in place in this bill are going to be really, really hard to revert.
Yeah.
That we really don't like, and that we're going to want to push further on when it comes to immigration. Like when you look at it was like, hey, as long as the number of crossings is under, like, I think it was like, I want to say 5,000, but I might be wrong. They basically put a cap. They were like, okay, as long as, you know, it stays under this cap, basically no real change. If it goes over this, we're going to shut the border down.
Okay.
Which they should have shut the fucking border down in the first place. Like, how about we do that? But you were right on your previous comment of, hey man, like this is going to require such significant, like this is a complete overhaul of the system. And I kind of liked like the phased approach that Vance was talking, like, hey, let's start with close the fucking border. Like you got to stop the bleeding. Right.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, let's focus on like the folks that are here and that are, you know, they've crossed the border illegally, and then they've come here and they've committed crimes, and then we're letting them back out on the street. How about we get rid of those motherfuckers next? He didn't really go very far beyond that in his explanation. As far as like, okay, then what? Like, he did say, hey, like we need to revamp the system to adjudicate the people that are here, right? There has to be a path to citizenship for a lot of these folks. So then you get Tim Walz kind of saying that, but you know, yeah. So that's the there on that piece.
Beautiful wall. And
Let's see what the response is.
Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't
he's
pass
not really
the smell
answering
test.
the question
For 3
either.
years, Kamala Harris
But
went
then
out
again,
bragging
that's like the new
that she
norm.
was gonna
They're not
undo
answering
Donald
no
Trump's
questions.
border policy.
So,
She did
hey,
exactly
both
that.
sides.
We had a record
So at
number
this
of
point,
illegal
you guys
we
aren't
had a
gonna hold them
record number of
accountable?
fentanyl
Okay,
coming
then
into
there's
our
a new
country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed.
Biden
It's
has
got to
since
stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your
just
time
months
is up.
before
Governor,
the election.
What about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up.
So what he should have said there was that it was a lot of those migrants in Springfield are legal, right? Under that Haitian program where they were basically bringing tons of them in and giving them, the equivalent of a parole status to be able to work legally, right? Like they were good to go. But when you flood an entire community like that, right, that's what was causing those problems. But he also, kind of jumped on the, they're eating the fucking dogs and cats story, right? Like, and helped blow that up, which is like not helpful, man. Like, so they both have points.
Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable. But it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
We're going off the rails. Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990.
Oh, they muted him. There it is. Oh,
gentlemen,
number one.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
They are. Who are these two?
The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a
giving out money.
Whose
money are they really giving out?
Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago. He said, "You're rich as hell. I'm going to give you a tax cut." He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris is said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question.
So why do they always do that?
They
always reference. Literally, we're talking like the last couple months of his administration.
Can't be trusted.
Right, during a global pandemic.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's so I guarantee you one of the things he's going to go to is, well, we had the largest job growth. Well, you can't count all of the jobs that, people had to leave because you shut down the fucking economy. And that's both of them. Right. Like,
yeah.
But right. Like at the end of the Trump era, right. Like the vaccines were starting to come out and it seemed like things were starting to open back up, but it was really a lot of the Dem policies that kept things closed. And, the infrastructure, or what was it? The Inflation Reduction Act that actually blew out inflation even worse. And all of the, repeat spending, of giving money away. That's tax dollars that we have to pay for that drove up inflation. It was a lot of their policies that really ramped up inflation. Now, whether or not Trump would have done the same thing, I don't know. Maybe. I don't.
Exactly.
My gut tells me no, but not to that same extent. But I don't know.
We don't know.
But watch. He's going to do the job thing. Hold on.
All right, let's see.
National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
Yes, but I asked once again,
Governor, you say trust the experts.
What has she done?
But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think
you're not a guy who wanted to ship things.
Most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice
They're literally just
the
listening
president
to their
hears
prompter.
Before making consequential
They got one in front
decisions.
of them and they got an earpiece.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz,
I thought they were going to go
you said you were in
somewhere else on
Hong
this.
Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring
this is a
of
good one.
1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually
caught him again,
didn't travel to Asia until
Caught him
August
lying
of
again.
that year.
Ooh.
Can you explain
said he was in
that
Tiananmen.
discrepancy? You have 2
Yeah,
minutes.
well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms.
You lied about that.
And then I used the GI Bill.
You lied when
to
you
become a teacher,
got that
passionate,
DUI and
a young
pretended to be
teacher.
deaf,
My
trying to get
first
out of
year
it.
out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there.
No.
We would take basketball
Go back
teams,
to-
we
let's
would
go back
take
to,
baseball teams, we would take dancers, and
you
we would go
claimed that
back
you were
and
in
forth to
Tiananmen,
China. The issue for
and
that
that
was
happened.
to try and learn.
That's
Now
just so
look,
weird.
my
We go
community
back and
knows who
forth
I
to
am.
China.
They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that
Go
I'm
back
there for the
to
people,
you're a dirty
to
liar.
make sure that
Back
I get
to-
this right. I will say more than anything.
Go back
Many
to you
times
liar ass off.
I will talk
Well,
a
he
lot.
did say
I
he
will
was a
get caught up
knucklehead.
in the rhetoric.
He did.
But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care
when
about.
you ditched your
Governor,
people
just
before they
to
deployed to
follow
Iraq?
up on
Like that one?
the question was, can you explain the
No, just
discrepancy?
all I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
That was awkward.
That was
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your
That
running
was
mate,
awkward.
Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic
Texts are forever,
populism.
homie.
You're now his running mate, and you've
gotta
shifted
love the
many of your
internet.
policy stances
the
to
internet
align
will
with
find
his.
it, bro.
If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews, is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular.
You do kind of need balance.
Tim, you don't accuse this of being a national sales tax.
And I feel like every command position,
and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did,
you do want somebody who's going to
some of the Trump tariffs,
question your decisions or bring up a different insight, and I do like the question, the way they asked it. Hey, are you going to give him the advice he needs, not the advice he wants?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you yourself, I know you will, from your experience, as a command enlisted advisor, senior advisor, there's been times where you've probably butt heads with those who who you're supposed to be. That is your teammate,
sure.
But I'm pretty sure you weren't always in agreement with the decisions being made, Yeah. But you would, obviously, you're not going to hinder. That's not going to affect your guys' command team time or nothing. You guys are just going to work through it.
Yeah, I mean, and right, there's obviously a little bit of a difference. A good command team, right? I can tell you, both of the commanders that I had the pleasure of working with, were very open and very receiving to any kind of advice, guidance.
Oh, exactly.
At the end of the day, right, that's the boss. The vice president typically, not always, but typically, like, it's considered, right, the most inconsequential job in government. Like, it's hey man, like, if the reports are true, Kamala Harris has for the most part played solitaire behind her computer for the last 3 years. It's really not a position where your advice is sought out, but maybe it's the person too. So
but a good note to make too, that people tend to also forget, she obviously was doing something and leading a team, because she's also had numerous amount of people during her time resign, to include her own chief of staff, on her staff.
Oh yeah. I think it's like out of the 40, almost 50, like there's like 6 remaining from her original staff.
Exactly. So I mean, what does that tell you too, as well? There's a lot of insight. I don't know why people haven't looked into that, but why aren't those people being interviewed? Like, why'd you leave? What happened?
They're right. Yeah. Nobody wants us to talk about that. This tariff thing is going to be kind of interesting.
Let's see.
Protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record.
So just to catch up, because we were talking during, in case somebody missed it, right? He's basically saying, hey, like these tariffs that Trump put in place were essentially, for the most part, kept by Biden. Like, he didn't get rid of the tariffs because they were kind of effective. And now Harris is backpedaling on it, and essentially saying, hey, this is like a gigantic tax on the American people, which kind of sort of, right? If you're purchasing goods, right, from, in this case, China, for instance, right, you put a 20% tariff on Chinese goods, right? As those goods come in, the Chinese, right, are having to pay a 20% tax, right, to ship those goods in. Now the question is, what happens, right? The price of the goods go up, right? But what does that incentivize? American
production,
right? So that's the long and the short of it. So yeah, we'll continue.
Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made...
Want to do this last one?
Well, which one?
You want to go through reproductive rights?
Oh,
we're doing it. We'll do this one.
Okay.
Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was
that is what the bill
he put
allowed.
The judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade. 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us,
well, he made sure to point
send
out
it to the
that's not what
states.
the bill
It's a
said.
beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley
There was
Duvall,
actually just
a
an incident in
12-year-old
California
child, raped and impregnated by her stepfather.
where they denied an
Those
abortion.
are horrific.
Yeah.
Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry.
Why?
of pregnancies.
Here again, Project
It's going to become more
2025.
difficult, if not impossible,
they don't fact
to
check
get
this,
contraception.
Please fact
and
check.
limit access, if not
It's literally
eliminate
right there.
access to infertility treatments.
now.
For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility
I'm
treatments
just
are why I have a child.
play the cards evenly
That's
here.
nobody else's
Right.
business. But those
One
things
set
are being
standard.
proposed.
Don't
And
be
the
selective here.
catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy
Real question
monitoring
is-
agency?
What is a
No,
woman?
Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who
saying
had
that.
unplanned
I was just
pregnancies
going to
and
say,
decided
all of
to
you.
terminate
we
those
should have a
pregnancies
drinking game.
because
I
they
wish we
feel
would have
like
had
they
a
didn't have any
drinking game for how
options.
many times they
And,
say
you know,
working class or middle class.
That would have been good.
That would be a good take a chug every time you hear working class or middle class.
Up right now.
And then
One
a shot
shot,
for every
one
question they
shot every
don't
time.
answer.
Oh, dude, I've died 12 minutes ago. Oh my God. Oh my Lord.
No, I one of them is actually very dear to me, and I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life...
She had to drive 9 hours to San Francisco because the doctors didn't want to, because one of the twins was, and you can look this up, she was having twins because they did some fertility treatment, and she's older and they were having twins. But then one of the twins, I guess, there was an issue. And the doctor said that basically they're going to have to do, she wanted to do an abortion on one of the twins so that she can have a healthy, at least one of them, save one of her little girls. Yeah. But the doctors refused to do it. But they also said that it's going to be complications on you. And so the doctors refused to do it. So she had to drive. They were like, well, you can fly. Your options is you can fly to San Francisco to this medical center and they will do it. The doctors there will do it. But here, and it starts with a P, it's something Presbyterian or something at that hospital, and they wouldn't do it. So, but they said that you can fly a helicopter, but your insurance will only pay so much. So it's going to be like $40,000 the bill just to transport you over there. So they gave her the option, hey, you're going to have to drive 9 hours to this other place to do it on your own. And the nurses were literally just going to give her like buckets because she was on they just said, the doctor said, we advise you don't do that because you're probably going to hemorrhage on the way. And then it'll be a different story. So long story short, she did make it to the facility 9 hours, and she also started to hemorrhage on the way. She got there just at a critical time, and it was a close call. And right now, because it's California, there's a big dispute right now where the Attorney General's office they're about to institute a lawsuit against those doctors, and it's going to be a mess. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. But this is all over the place. The Georgia case that he's talking about, if he's blowing it, he's missing out some very critical things about how she essentially should have gotten. It's the same thing, right? Because of the overturn of Roe versus Wade, the woman that he's referring to in Georgia, right? Like they were confused on the type of care that she should have gotten, and it would have been legal for her to essentially get an abortion. Because right, she was already having a miscarriage, if I remember correctly, right? So in order to take care of herself, right? Like, so she went to North Carolina. They sent her back to Georgia, like, and it was just this confusing thing, and this woman wound up dying. And realistically, like, Georgia all along should have been able to handle it. And it was a doctor issue, not necessarily an abortion issue. But instead of right, all or none, right, we can't have the conversation and have, the old school, safe, rare, and legal, right? Like, was the old like abortion mantra, and then it's become this like, well, whenever the fuck you want, like all the way up to where the child is essentially, and it happens. They did a study up in Canada who actually like follows these stats, right? Like when an abortion happens and the child is still born in theory alive, right? It's a failed abortion, right? So what they're talking about, right? Like is there are still no protections when that happens for that living creature, right? That living human, right? So essentially they just kind of set that kid aside and just let nature take its course.
Oh, geez.
And so the percentage on that is up to 10%.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, depending, and it depends on when the abortion obviously like starts, right? Like the later, the higher likely, like that percentage increase. But roughly, you're looking at like 8 to 10% of potential abortions resulting in a failed abortion, right? And that potentially, again, depending on how many weeks, right? Like that happening. But they don't want to talk about that, and that stat isn't kept in the U.S., right? So when they're talking about all the way up to the 9th month, right? Like that's kind of what they're talking about is a live birth, right? And then the docs like just kind of setting that thing aside and being like, meh. Like give it a couple hours. It'll sort itself out. Instead of providing immediate medical care. And so, right, it goes back to, having common sense, like, which isn't common anymore, restrictions in place. And then conversely, right, like cases of rape, incest, those things, right? There shouldn't be any restriction. Like you should be able to, right? Like you should be able to go in and get an abortion. Period.
Yeah.
Stop. And I don't think you should tell people what to do with their bodies. At this point, it's in the state's hands, but you're right. It's creating a clusterfuck.
It really is.
Complete clusterfuck. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
No, this will be a forever ongoing issue.
Yeah.
And your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography. There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it,
and
you hear us talking exactly the same.
Just shitty
Donald
medical
Trump
care.
is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making child care more accessible.
I mean, it sounds good. It briefs well.
Because we've got to do a better job at that. And
trust,
that's what real leadership
the trust.
Governor, your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that, too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two
Is
things
that why
to try
people
and
are
say
leaving that
we're
state
pro-children,
at
but we
a
don't like
gigantic
this,
rate?
or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all.
Your population
We
is
are
decreasing.
pro-freedoms for women to make
I'm
their
actually-
choices.
and I'm a Twins
we're
fan.
going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you.
R.I.P.
Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience, more pro-baby and pro-family.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
about? That is not the way the law is written. Look,
Yes, it is.
I've given
But
this,
how?
I've
Well,
given this
then
advice on a lot
tell
of
them how
things
it's
that
written. You
getting
signed
involved,
it.
That's been miswritten.
Right.
It was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and
It was
tell women
fact-checked
or to get involved.
incorrectly at the
I
last
use
debate.
this line on this. Just mind your own
I don't
business
get why
on this.
okay, dude,
Things work
you signed
best
it.
when
Tell
Roe
them what
versus
it
Wade was
really
in
is.
place.
Like,
Right.
When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us
Oh my
from
gosh, man.
increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us.
And
from
I
making
agree
sure
with
that once
them.
that child's
I agree
born,
with
like in
them
Minnesota,
position on this
they
one.
get meals.
No,
They get early
I do
childhood
too,
education.
but
They
it's
get
like,
health care. So the
you have the
behind,
ammo,
we're going to
use
do
it.
all these other things.
Right.
When
If
you're
it's
not
there.
proposing them in your
That's just
budget,
it. If it's
Kamala
there.
Harris is
There's
proposing
two
them.
things
She's
that can be
proposing
true at
all
once,
those things
right?
to
Like,
make
I
life
can
easier for
support-
families.
I asked
can
a specific
support-
question, Governor. You gave me a slogan
Yeah.
as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen,
Wrong.
there's a lot to
Anyway,
discuss. We have to move on,
that's
and we're
what I
going to be
would-
right back
just
with much
went
more
wrong.
of the CBS News
I don't-
vice presidential
Yeah, I
debate
don't know.
in just a moment.
I have
said
no
we-
idea.
I say we call it there.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm cool with that. Yeah, we don't need to go all the way into it. We know it's just going to be the same thing. Same thing. But I'll tell you what, man. I mean, what are your thoughts so far? I mean, as far as from what you've seen, what is your assessment as far as, hey, who's doing well, who's kind of leading this thing?
Yeah.
And you know, let's do a quick little AAR. You know, what are some
Yeah.
sustains, some improves?
Yeah, man. I think Tim Walz actually did better than I kind of expected him to. He started off shaky. Like, you know, he just kind of didn't have his footing yet. You can tell he's not as seasoned as JD Vance is. You know, Vance is much more articulate and just kind of flows better. I think he had a couple of potential slam dunks that he could have nailed Walz on initially, but I think he did really well. You know, I think he had probably some better answers. Tim Walz was doing a lot of the tap dancing, right? Because he can't defend the Biden-Harris record on a lot of things. He just can't. Obviously, I think that last exchange, you know, that we watched regarding abortion, I think, you know, Tim Walz obviously had a leg up, and maybe right, and I'm implying personal bias there too.
Yeah.
Because on a lot of those topics and issues, I do swing right on policy. And on that one, I swing left. So, but I, you know, when you look at where the American people generally sit, it tends to be the same, right?
I agree.
When you talk the economy, you know, current administration or potential Trump administration policies, where does the American people sit? Trump. Border, Trump. You foreign policy. It's kind of mixed, but mostly Trump. And then you've got the big Democrat talking point being abortion, right? The majority of Americans swing that direction. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Again, right? Like it's the vice presidential debate. That was a more. I'll tell you what, though, that was a more informative, I think, good debate than what we saw out of the presidential debate.
Yeah, I could see that. I could agree on that. I think JD Vance also came in hitting, like he came in heading as well. He presents himself very well. He just from a talking standpoint, you can tell he's very confident. He presents himself well. He's using their name. Tim Walz wasn't doing it. He's like the question, hey, thank you, Nora. Nora, sure. If I may, like those are little behavior characteristics that I tend to pay attention to.
Yeah.
But he also did there were a lot of agreeing on these. I don't know if you heard those, but there were a lot of hey, I do agree with you. And this is coming from both ends. I do agree, but I did like how JD Vance, how he did imply, I feel for you, Tim, because you have a tough job. You're in a tough position.
That was a good line.
That was good. And to me, that stood out because he's applying some compassion towards him. And he also understands his role in that sense, because he does have he has a tough spot. He has to literally defend the past 3 years, 3.5 years.
Yeah. I think that was a good dig. I thought that was a good line. I don't think that was compassionate. I thought that was a great line to dig at him, right? And be like, hey man, you're full of shit. Because you're trying to defend this thing of that is
Will, you just gotta go with it.
And it's not gonna work, man. You're trying to defend this thing while then turning around and saying how you're gonna be different. When realistically your policies are pretty fucking similar. And tell me why you're running away from your current administration. You are the current administration. You're the current administration.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
You're simultaneously trying to throw that in the dumpster and be like, no, we're going to change it.
That's not even just based off the party. I'm not going for the candidate. I'm just saying, even if the roles were reversed, and let's just say, even if it was Trump running and his administration was in charge, hey, I would apply that same standard.
Oh,
hey, we're in a mess. You've had 3 years. What have you done? And in that sense, that's a good leg up right there, I would say. And it's good. You should definitely point that out. That should be a fact because it is a fact and people need to be aware of that. And so I do applaud that, and I do applaud, hey, you know what, Tim? Hey, Tim he also is very personal. He also would conduct himself, at least from what I observed, and he definitely appeals himself, to the middle class, to he's very good. If you notice, he always has a little story to go with his answers.
Sure,
he'll throw a little comparison to kind of gain some emotional appeal.
Yeah.
He's mentioned three different names of females. Yeah. So with a story.
Yeah, and that was a lot of that was towards the end, right? That's an issue, right? The Dems just run with 1,000%, right? They run away with it, period. The Republicans can't run on that, and they pissed off a lot of the country on it, right? But they've also energized their base over it. So, but overall, right? When you start talking.
Okay, Chaunch, appreciate that.
When you start talking about,
thanks for the input.
great line. When you start talking about the what the Dems can run on, right? That's one of the big ones that they can run on is abortion, right? They're going to win that 100 times out of 100. and rightfully so. I thought that was probably the weakest portion of JD when he's trying to defend that, and he just keeps talking about
never, man. You hopped in the right time.
Yeah.
Okay. We just want to see you interrupted Will, so good job. But you better give a good compliment on Will. All right. Tell him how handsome he looks, all that good stuff. Tell him his hair looks nice today, and then share your input on the debate. All right. So if you're watching, please put it in the chat. What are your thoughts? Who do you think won that debate? As we go forward on this. But yes, I see what you're saying, Will. You're one of those that's just like out for the blood. You just want to see blood, don't you? Is that what it is? You want to see some carnage?
I want to see, right? Like we talked about, right? I want to see accountability. I want to see somebody answer the fucking question. Like that would be great.
Oh my God, yes. Answer the freaking questions, man.
Would you be okay with the Israelis doing a strike? Yeah, right. Yeah. That'd be, you know what?
Answer the question. Hey, Will, let me ask you. How would you like it if you ran a promotion board and everyone went in there, just never answered the question, but they just gave this long word salad?
Get the fuck out. Like, come on, man. Like, I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. Nowhere in your incoherent ramblings have you presented even the semblance of
what is the max range of the M4 carbine?
We are all dumber for having listened.
I would take it like, hey, if you ask, what is the max range of the M4 carbine? Well, in 1942, there was a story.
Middle-class kid.
When I grew up a middle-class kid as a small kid, that's their response initially. They're going to start off with like, Sergeant Majors, thank you for asking me that question. I will start off by this.
I'm going to start a whisper campaign. All right. I'm going to just wait. I'm going to contact the old mafia and I'm going to start a whisper campaign. And your next board, every kid in there is going to start off with, well, I grew up a middle-class kid.
And they're going to start off with, First Sergeant, thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate that. I want to start off by saying
that I
was born and raised in a small town. I just want to ask you what the max range of the M4 carbine is.
And everyone,
you know what? I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that the next command and staff.
Do it. I dare you.
just do it.
That's so good.
It's funny. We were actually in a command staff today. And I feel like there's an impression of me that the boss has, because he's, we're doing our closing comments. And then he just was like, hey, I just want to say it's so-and-so's birthday. Everyone just started clapping and stuff. And I hand over my coffee cup. I was like, oh, that's awesome. We want a shot? And then everyone just started laughing. He's like, First Sergeant guy goes, sometimes I don't know. You're starting to make me wonder. And I was like, sir, you ever heard of Aldrich James? And if you ever know that backstory.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good time. It's a good time. But I definitely wanted to see that happen now. I want to start doing that as my questioning. Hey, that's a good question, sir. I really appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and start off by saying this. Like, let's let it go with that. Just let that be the start off.
Dude, that's gonna be fucking hilarious.
I'm gonna try it.
Start that trend. It'll be great.
I'm gonna try it. Hell yeah.
I'm gonna start getting fucking phone calls being like, you're encouraging it.
I know. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. By the way, the boss, the big boss, his change of responsibilities November 7th. I don't know if you were going to come out or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, November 7th, the big boss finally is doing his change of responsibility. November 7th. So that's going to be a good thing.
I might have some more free time coming up here.
Ooh. Wink, wink. Wink, wink.
I'm having a seizure.
Oh man. Oh well, dude. Yeah. Hey, the debate. We'll see how it goes. I'm pretty sure it's gonna blow up as far as everything's gonna start coming out. I'm pretty sure social media is gonna start blasting little clips. You know how it goes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll be curious to see where all the pundits kind of land on performance. And if let me put it this way, man, if the presidential debate didn't move the needle, and it didn't,
No,
I don't see this one moving it. I really don't.
Yeah, and I think people do. Like, I mean, the American people are smarter than what the media probably thinks they are. And they know. Like you said yourself, it is a vice president debate. It is the vice president position.
Yeah.
We know, like, as you could tell, there's not super influential, power enabled on them, yet.
No,
but it is a position that is required for the checks and balances.
I'll tell you, man, that was a more professional debate. That was a more
I would say that.
I think interesting. There was at least a little more tidbits and things you could pull out policy wise, and it wasn't just one candidate fucking poking the other one and the other one just losing his shit for hours on end.
I picture they're probably gonna go share a glass of whiskey of Buffalo Trace after this. I bet.
You know what? That would be great for the country. I'll tell you that.
I think that's what is needed. Buffalo Trace, if you're not listening, you guys need to sponsor one of these debates in the future.
Yeah, with us as moderators, just stop Buffalo Tracing it up.
I agree.
Speaking of sponsors,
ooh, let's see it.
Speaking of sponsors, where's yours at, man?
Let me tell you, man, it's been a story. Our times have not matched up, but I'm gonna try. Yeah, I'm actually gonna try tomorrow.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is this amazing handcrafted American flag behind me. If you want your own handcrafted real wood made by a U.S. veteran, check out that link at the bottom. Go to handcraftedveteran.etsy.com and then check out that coupon code of where's my discount.
Where's my discount? Coupon code.
Where is it? Where's my discount? Drop that in the old coupon code there. You will get 10% off of your purchase of a badass handcrafted.
Not that made in China stuff.
Not made in China. Made in the good state of Texas currently.
Hell yeah.
Right. You want custom logo work?
Let's
this
go
right here.
Look at that awesome logo.
You want something specific. You want just something cool. A gigantic piece over the fireplace. This guy makes it. Does absolutely fucking amazing work. And he deserves it.
Yeah.
So go check him out. That's Jeremiah Treadway, handcraftedveteran.etsy.com. Coupon code, where's my discount?
Where's my discount? Get it, guys. Take advantage of it. All right, Will, you got anything else for the team? I think we're ready to wrap up. Guys, once again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Those of you tuned in, interacted with us in the chat as we did this. I wouldn't mind doing this again, Will, later on in the future for any big events or anything like that going forward.
Let's do it. Love it.
I definitely love it. We tried something new, team, going live, doing a live broadcast, as you know, unfiltered, raw, uncut. There's no edits. There's no crazy graphics. I'm not making, weird little or GIFs or GIFs or whatever you call them over Will's head, so there's just a lot of good, just raw, uncut, unfiltered live reaction, so I appreciate you guys tuning in on that. And as always, team, if you'd like, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but as always, team, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're just tuning in and you're watching, you kind of check the other videos down below. You're going to get an idea of what we're about and just the craziness that we apply to our videos, and to the content that we're putting out there. It's not always like, I would say, I don't know. What would you label our content as? It definitely is from a different perspective. But what would you label it as, Will?
Like you said,
how would you describe it?
I would describe it a lot like your penis, raw, uncut, unfiltered.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gone that far, but okay. But yeah, raw, uncut, definitely filter. Thanks, Will. Thank you. Are you happy?
I am now.
Okay, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are.
Your additional content, you got to get behind that paywall.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. All right, team. Enough's enough. Drink your water, do your push-ups, take your vitamins, guys. We'll see you on the next one. All right, team. Out.